Welcome back to Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co host, the everlasting Chris Kaye. We're back with the second half of the ABCs of Metal, the letter C.
On the last episode, Cannibal Corpse faced off against Carcass and continued on. And then Candlemass faced off against Cradle of Filth and continued on. So we're going to start with the next round, the true round of all of the C bands. And just stay tuned for some exciting head to heads.
And once we're done with that, stick around for our big four songs that start with the letter C. So sit back, relax, turn it up to 11, and let the debate begin. Okay, so we are now to the main round. I guess the round of eight. Yes, the round of eight. So we have Cannibal Corpse moved on earlier. They're going to face Celtic Frost. Candlemass has moved on. They're going to face Children of Bottom on this round. But we're going to talk about the other four bands that we haven't spoken about yet before we get to those. So our next round is going to be Cavalier Conspiracy versus Corrosion of Conformity. So we're getting a little bit, quote unquote, lighter to some degree with COC and Cavalier Conspiracy. So Corrosion of Conformity, they started out as a punk band. They've released 10 studio albums, 4 EPs, 1 live album, 1 compilation. They have 1 album that went gold. Like I said, they started out as a hardcore punk band, very similar to Suicidal Tendencies, but completely across the country since they were COCs out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and Suicidal was in California. And much like Suicidal did in the 80s, they kind of went away from the hardcore punk stuff and kind of went to a thrashy metal sound. And eventually COC kind of settled in on the kind of groovy southern metal style that they have going on now. Um, what would what do you think of COC?
They were a band I just completely missed out on. I'd known about them. Like I mentioned, something about Pepper Keenan earlier. Like I've known about them, and I didn't even realize I knew some of their songs. Like I was like, oh, this is them. Okay, I've heard this song before. Like I had heard "Clean My Wounds." Never knew it was "Corrosion of Conformity."
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, I
I just
love that song.
it was just a band that I just didn't pick up on, and it wasn't for any reason like I didn't like them or this or that. It was just, how sometimes that's just how things go.
Yeah.
um and so, when I was listening to them, the last couple weeks, here and there, like I was like, okay, they're pretty cool. I like some of the songs, and um I think it's one that I'm gonna have to dive into a little more to really get a better view of things. But I just kind of maybe overlooked them, kind of like the same thing with Suicidal Tendencies, where maybe I heard one song and I was like, okay, well, this doesn't really interest me, so I just never dive into it or anything like that. It was, circumstance, really.
Yeah. I mean, I never got into COC either. The funny thing about COC was I saw the ads in the magazines in the 80s for their albums, but I never really went in that direction. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't hear much about them other than through the magazines.
Mhm.
Um, but like I never heard Eye for an Eye. But then again, see, the only reason I heard Suicidal Tendencies' first album was because the girl that sat next to me in high school, she was a Suicidal Tendencies fan. You would never have guessed it. She looked like a mom growing up. It's literally at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. She looked like a mom. She was that kind of thing, but she's like, "Oh yeah, I love Suicidal," and I'm like, she liked Metallica and Iron Maiden, but Suicidal was her thing. I Saw Your Mommy and Your Mommy's Dead was one of her favorite songs. But
Interesting.
that's the kind of style that was on Eye for an Eye, excuse me, and it was very, very hardcore punk. And then when you listen to the next album, you listen to something like Blind, um, and all of a sudden it's like, and that's not necessarily the next album, but you listen to an album like Blind, and it's like, wait a second, it's getting more along the lines, if you remember at all. Well, you probably know, you weren't there. Um, when Suicidal released Possessed Escape, or Join the Army album, Possessed Escape was an EP. They had the single, and it was just this really cool, fast groove. Nothing crazy heavy, nothing crazy punky, but it was kind of like just really quick. Um, but even then, the vocals were not super fast. It's kind of hard to describe. It's a fast song, um, and it has a really killer groove to it. However, it's not one of these songs that's like punky.
Hmm.
The only way to understand it is to listen to it, but I like that song. Possess Escape was pretty cool. So songs on Blind are very similar to that, but they were slowly, Blind was going away from the hardcore punk into the more mainstreamish thrashish metal, and then eventually, Clean My Wounds. Um, that song is pretty much the style that COC is now. Um, and Then they released a couple albums later. After that, it was America's Volume Dealer, and that song, Congratulations Song. I mean, God, it's so uh grunge. The guitar sound is so grungy. It's so I mean, that could almost be considered a stoner metal, or even a little bit on the sludge metal, or what would, even something like doomy like Candlemass, but it's not slow like that. Congratulations was a little bit more upbeat, and
Mm.
I like it. I think it's a pretty cool song. However, their music musical prowess spans so much in terms of diversity, I guess you could say. Like, they're a completely different band than what they started out as. Like, everyone talks about, oh yeah, Metallica's not the same. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, they're not the same, but they're remotely similar. Where COC is not the same band. It's like, okay, yeah, they're not. So, um, you should listen to some more COC. Like, listen to was it the Albatross album? That's a Is it called No, Deliverance. Really good album. That was their biggest album, by the way. That's the one that went gold.
Okay.
And then I like America's Volume Dealer in terms of certain songs.
Yeah,
So
I mean, it was interesting. Like, it didn't, stick out as something I needed to like dive into, just completely. Some bands you pick up and you're like, man, I really like this. What is this? And then you're listening to them for 2 months straight because you're
right.
trying to, fun it. And I haven't experienced that much in the last, 10 years or so. But every once in a while, like, man, I find something where I'm like, God, I got to listen to more and more of this. And that's
Avenged
such a
Sevenfold is that for you right now.
that's it for me for right now. But it's like, that experience is so cool. And I used to get that all the time. And I'm glad I'm kind of feeling that again, where like I can pick up something and just get really excited about listening to it again.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, I will definitely check out more of Corrosion of Conformity, but the stuff that I listen to is really cool.
Yeah, Animosity was their second album, which is the one that was more similar to Join the Army from Suicidal. All
Okay.
right. So they're up against Cavalier Conspiracy. So we have a little bit of personal connection to Cavalier. We saw them recently.
Yeah.
Um, so when we went to that show, they were billed as Cavalera, and they're not necessarily Cavalier Conspiracy.
Yeah, there was
However,
no conspiracy that day.
no. However, if you look at their discography, that is actually listed under Cavalier Conspiracy. So there is that part of it which is Cavalier Conspiracy. I think it's the same band, but they released the Sepultura cover albums on just as Cavalera because it's a lot easier to say Cavalera and mimic the style of the Sepultura album than it was to put Conspiracy on there.
And the logo, I think, is a big factor because
Right,
when they're doing the Morbid Visions cover, they're mimicking the Sepultura logo as Cavalera, and the same thing with Schizophrenia.
right,
So I think it just works better in that context. But yeah, it's definitely the same band.
right. So now Cavalier Conspiracy, they've got 4 studio albums, 2 cover albums, and 1 cover EP. Basically, Cavalier Conspiracy came out of basically the brothers getting back together again. It had been 10 years or so. They reunited after Igor left Sepultura and Cavalier Conspiracy was born. The first album, or the first 2 albums, I really dig. Um, very, very heavy metal. I wouldn't even call it extreme metal. It's heavy metal. Um,
I mean, it's got some death metal aspects to it, and Max's vocals have always been kind of
I
deathy,
mean,
right?
yeah, but if like
But
to
it's
me, it's
like
very
thrash and groove, yeah.
yeah, like it reminds me a lot of Chaos AD, and even parts of Roots. It does not remind me of anything of Schizophrenia or Bestial Devastation, right?
No, no,
But
yeah.
then they decided to move on from that sound, which almost was a lot more like middle to early Soulfly, right? And then they went with a very extreme kind of metal with their next 2 albums.
Yeah.
So that kind of um, threw me off a little bit. I was kind of like, do I really, like this or not? I mean, I really haven't listened to those albums since they came out. I mean, Pandemonium and Psychosis. I mean, it got more and more extreme. Like the Psychosis was like crazy extreme. Um, I can't. I don't know. Like, there's a difference between screaming vocals, like like what Death has, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then screaming. There's a big difference. And Psychosis to me has a lot of screaming. I could be
Okay.
wrong. Maybe I didn't listen to it long enough. You know,
Yes and no. I mean, to me, it's like I think of Cavalier Conspiracy as more like a project than I think of it as a band in some ways. Even though it is a band, it's just like he has Soulfly, right? And Soulfly is to me more of a band for sure. And they started off with a lot of the style that was carried over from Roots and got heavier and heavier. And like with Cavalier Conspiracy, there's like each album, yeah, there's some consistency there, but there's also each one feels like a different album with a different purpose behind it. And like they, after blunt force trauma, they go away from a lot of the groove kind of sound, and you know get back into the heavier sound, but they're still maintaining some of that South American vibe, which I think is cool, and what makes Max's and Igor's music their music. um so it's Cavalier Conspiracy is a weird one for me because, like, if I think of which band I want to listen to more, like, probably gonna gear towards Soulfly, even though I'm definitely much more interested in the heavier stuff that they did later. I don't really care for the new metal kind of beginnings of Soulfly as much, um, but
Ki-
Cavalier Conspiracy, I think, is fun. It's like it is interesting, and like you have to recognize that each album's going to feel a bit different.
yeah. I mean, I really enjoy um, Blunt Force Trauma. I love the song "Killing Inside." I love the
Mhm.
song "I Speak Hate." I Inflicted was super cool. Inflicted, I love that song.
I think Inflicted for me is the best one, but yeah, I still like all of it.
I didn't dig Pandemonium as much, but also didn't give it another chance. This was way before I met you, so
Fair enough, yeah.
and the same thing with Psychosis. Um, I do like their versions of Morbid Visions and Schizophrenia and Bestial Devastation. Um, I do like the more modern sound that those songs get now, the treatment that they have. Um, I think they did a really good job on re-recording those songs.
Yeah.
Um, even to the criticism of the guys from Sepultura. Um, so what? You know what? Get over it. This was Max and Igor's band to begin with, and so they had every right to record it and upgrade it as they wanted. So yeah, I agree with you. Cavalier Conspiracy is more like a project. It's not really a full time band to me, um, like Soulfly is. But even then, at that point, Soulfly is becoming one of these kinds of bands that are um, you know
It's kind of the same now, yeah.
taken 10 years to put out an album kind of thing,
Yeah.
but Soulfly has put out so many albums and they've been pretty consistent. So they just released Chama, which I thought was pretty good last year. That's pretty decent album. It was definitely a little bit of a change from Totem, because Totem, they kept getting more and more extreme. And then Chama is very, to me, was reminiscent to Roots in how they went back to their roots. Pun intended.
Which weren't their roots, because it's not the way they started, but yeah,
Right,
I get the
exactly.
joke, yeah, I get the
Yeah,
joke.
no, their actual and
Yes,
their
where they're
upbringing kind of,
from,
yeah,
yeah.
where they're from. Their Brazilian roots. So Chama was a pretty good album. I thought I liked it a bit. So I gave that a better listen than I had other albums in the past. So anyway, you got Cavalier Conspiracy there, and they are, as I said, we put them up against Corrosion of Conformity. So who do you think out of those two should move on?
Man, it's a hard one for me because, like, I really haven't listened to a whole lot of Corrosion of Conformity, so I feel like it's hard for me to really give it the fair the fairer shake that I've given everything else. Um, but as far as like a level of consistency or maybe like just the data on them, um, excuse me. So as far as corrosion of conformity, like their most popular song is "Clean My Wounds," and it's got 34.4 million streams. For Cavalier Conspiracy, it's inflicted, and it's got 8.9 million streams. Um, you know, obviously there's the consistency of the lineup of Cavalier Conspiracy. It's the same three guys that it's pretty much always been. Classic lineup of Corrosion of Conformity, Woody Weatherman, Pepper Keenan, Mike Dean, Reed Mullen. They have one gold album, Deliverance, Grammy nomination, and like they're pretty well known for being an influence of like sludge metal, that kind of crossover stuff. And then Sepultura is essentially a supergroup that's kind of, did I say Sepultura? Cavalier Conspiracy is kind of like a supergroup that's kind of carrying on Max's version of Sepultura. And I guess really both of them, right? Like it's Max and Igor, because that's been them the whole time. So it's tough because Cavalier Conspiracy in a way is like somewhat of a legacy band, because like when they play a lot of Sepultura stuff, and of course they have their own stuff, but like there is unfortunately the stigma of they lost the Sepultura name, and it is essentially, like I said, the brothers carrying on Sepultura, whereas corrosion of conformity, whereas corrosion of conformity, like they don't have that kind of stigma, and I think they have more accolades in that way. So I would say I'm leaning more towards corrosion of conformity.
Okay, so I hear that point. I'm leaning towards Cavalier Conspiracy.
Okay.
Um, for me, Cavalier Conspiracy is, um, I mean, I enjoy that music more. You know,
Okay.
despite the fact that there's parts of it that are extreme. Okay, we went to go see them do Chaos AD.
Yeah.
Um, and I gotta hand it to Max. Okay, I saw Chaos AD with Sepultura in 1995 in a small club, very similar to what we saw when we saw them recently.
Mhm.
And it was by far, and I wasn't up front in 1995. I was in the back of the floor. I was actually kind of stepping down. There was a back area, like I guess you could say the bar area, and it had like three steps on the left and the right, and the soundboard was on a wall. There was a wall. You step down three steps, and in front of the wall on the floor side was the soundboard. Right, so you go down the steps on either the left or the right. I was going down on the right side, and when the first song, "Refuse Resist," started, I had to hold on for my life because the place went insane. I mean, there was just moshing everywhere.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like it before, and I can't say since because since then we went to see Cavalera, and I would sit there and say it's probably one of the craziest shows I've been to.
Yeah, but
Death
again, like that show was Sepultura. It really wasn't even Cavalera. It was him playing the Sepultura songs.
Right, exactly. They're
And
playing Sepultura songs. But
yeah,
like I said, he and his brother are Sepultura. So if they're performing as Cavalera, well, that's what they have to call themselves now. Then that's what they are, right? So yes,
okay.
in a way, you're true. It's a legacy type band. I'm looking at the DVD edition of in Blunt Force Trauma, and they play Inflicted and Sanctuary, but they play one, two, three, four, five, six, seven songs that are Sepultura, one song that is Sepultura related. Um, and it's just crazy that
Yeah.
that they play that. And you know what? I would love to see that show. I would love to see them combine Sepultura with Cavalier Conspiracy. I think it's a good show. I can't take anything away or discredit what they do because they lost. He lost a name. He gave away the name because he wanted nothing to do with those guys because they fucked him over.
Yeah.
You know, so I give him all the credit in the world. He went out. He started Soulfly. I'm much more into the earlier stuff than you are. Um, so
Yeah, we're pretty
yeah,
much opposite on what we like
yeah,
about Soulfly, which is funny.
yeah.
But okay, well, by that token, I mean, I'm okay with giving it um to Cavalier Conspiracy, but I just had to say that
Oh, of
as
course, I
far
get
as
that.
like that the fact is, you know, a big part of what they do is the legacy of Sepultura. And by that token, it's like we're not really voting on Sepultura, we're voting on um Cavalera.
Right.
But if you are under the notion that they're just really an extension of Sepultura, I'm fine with giving them that as far as like, I don't have as much of a dog in this fight.
Well, I'll put it this way: I'd rather go see Cavalier Conspiracy than COC.
Fair
You know,
enough.
and COC, as good as band as they are, uh, I understand them. I've seen Pepper a few times. I've seen them. I've seen COC open up for Metallica. I've seen Down play, which is weird. I've seen Down open up for Metallica.
Yeah.
I saw COC open for Metallica in 1997 with Pepper Keenan, and I saw Down open up for Metallica in 2008 with Pepper and Phil. So COC's cool. I liked them. However, I think I like Cavalier more.
Okay.
So
Well, I
we're
guess they're
gonna
gonna advance.
so Cavalier Conspiracy advances. Um, so they will face the winner between Candlemass and Children of Bottom. But before that, we're going to talk about two bands we haven't touched on upon yet: Cinderella and Creed. Cinderella versus Creed. So now we've been talking about extreme metal all night long. Now we get to glam metal and alternative metal. And
I'm
even
sorry,
people
when I keep reading Cinderella and Creed next to each other, it's like the name that like people name their horses, like Cinderella Creed, you know. And
so Cinder, and Creed, there's could be a lot of people criticizing this one, but I don't care. All right, so Cinderella, one of my favorite bands out of the 80s, but that's neither here nor there. 4 studio albums, 2 live albums that have been rebranded. Like one of them has been, it's been called uh was it the key the Key Club. Live at the Key Club has been rebranded as Live in Concert, Live this, Live that, like 21 different times, to the point where I think the Wikipedia says they got 21 live albums, and like, or something to that effect. I'm like, they don't have that many live albums. It's the same damn album, just renamed 100 different times. They got 5 compilations. Out of those 4 studio albums, they've got 3. 3 out of the 4 went gold and platinum. 2 out of those 4 went triple platinum. So the
okay.
first album, Night Songs and Long Cold Winter, both went triple platinum. So that's pretty cool. Um, Cinderella has always been one of my favorite bands out of the 80s. Night Songs, you and I were talking about that recently. Night Songs, killer album front to back.
Hmm.
If you're looking for melody, if you're looking for groove, if you're looking for just a good ass album that you can listen to front to back, that album does it. It starts off slow with Night Songs, right? It it builds, but as soon as it goes into Shake Me, it really, I mean, even though the next song after that is Don't Know, what you call it, Nobody's
Yep.
Fool,
Nobody's.
it's not like a slow plotter like Night Songs, but it's the biggest song on the album because it was there's a song that broke them on MTV. Shake Me was a good single, but Nobody's Fool broke them. And then they released Somebody Save Me after that, and it was just groove after groove after groove. Second album comes out, uh, and they basically shed the glam metal part of it, even though they're playing that same thing, but they're now playing that blues metal kind of shit, which for the 80s blues metal, the 80s glam metal that was more bluesy than it was you know, glammy. And that album was killer. I mean, Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone. Um, the long was it Coming Home? The Long Mile, I think it was a song. And then what was the other big hit? Oh, I forgot. It's the second song on the album. But anyhow, the I mean, that album was great. And then they released the third album, and that's when things started to go bad for them. Uh, I mean, I'm going to be honest. The third album wasn't as good, and the fourth album, which came out way many years later, or early '90s compared to '88, it hurt them. I mean, I can't say many years later because I think Heartbreak Station came out in '90, I think, but then uh, um, was it Still Climbing? It was like
Still
'93.
climbing. Yeah.
You know, in '93, '94, it was one of those where it was like you've been anticipating Cinderella, and they put out Still Climbing, and the biggest song was from I think it was Wayne's World. It was the single that they had on there that was on there, and it wasn't that good. I'm gonna be honest. I'm a big fan, but it just wasn't that good.
I mean, for me, like the first album, I think is their absolute best, but it's the most metal album. You're right. Like they over time they got into more of like the blues aspect of it, and that's where they lost me. But Tom Kiefer's voice is just amazing. like the sheer levels of like what he was able to do, like with that "Don't Know What You Got Until It's Gone." Um, that like holy shit, like you watch the video, watch his actual vocal movements and things like that. Like, you know, um, the guy's an incredible singer. Um, so like you know, 4 albums, it's not a lot to judge on. You know, less than a decade essentially. But like the first song, it's pretty much a front to back. Like I even bought it on vinyl because I like it that much. Long Cold Winter still has like a lot of really good stuff. Um, so
No,
that one's a pretty.
Gypsy Road was a song I was thinking about,
Oh, okay.
and not the long
Um,
mile, but the last mile.
I gotcha. But Long Cold Winter's still really good. You're right. Like when they start getting into the more, essentially becoming more of a blues band. That's where they lost a lot of their momentum, and you know, just not really fitting into that same genre of what they were before. So, you know, you change too much, you know, run the risk of running off your fans.
Yeah, no, and I mean, look, they settled on that blues rock, blues metal kind of vibe, and that's great. I don't have a problem with that. Heartbreak Station, I mean, it wasn't a bad album, but it definitely was a step down from Long Cold Winter. Um, I mean, their biggest song on that album was "Shelter Me." Heartbreak Station was one of those ballads that was supposed to be like "Don't know what you have, don't know what you got, but till it's gone." It just didn't do it. Love's Got Me Doing Time was a good song. It was a very little funky song. It started to go to blues, very similar to Badlands' second album.
Mhm.
It changed. It went from a glamish kind of first bluesy album, and then it was like, oh, we're going hardcore blues metal or blues rock, and that's what they did with Heartbreak Station. And I'm like, okay, so they lost it a little bit. You know, when Still Climbing came out, it was almost an afterthought. The song I was talking about, Hot and Bothered, was it came out in Wayne's World.
Yeah, that was actually the first Cinderella song that I can remember hearing. Doesn't mean it was the one that I first heard. It was just the one that, like, I knew that was Cinderella.
Yeah, and then
And that was oh, go ahead.
no, no, finish up. I'm sorry.
Well, that was just because I owned the Wayne's World soundtrack, so I knew who Cinderella was at that point, you know?
Right, right, right. You know, and for me, you know, Hot and Bothered, best song on the album was because it was an add-on because it was on Wayne's World. You know,
Yeah.
so
And
it was just
it's a rock song. It's not blues, you know?
right,
It's
yeah.
yeah.
It's just disappointing that they kind of were at this point, you know, Fred Curry was no longer in the band. He did Hot and Bothered, but he was out of the band because he went on to do other stuff. The band wasn't really doing much. They were having their personal issues between Tom and Jeff, and Eric was just sitting in the sidelines. You know, it is what it is at this point. That's the way. Though you know, that's their career in a nutshell. They never got back together, or they did actually get back together in the late '90s and early 2000s and stuff like that. They were doing when there was that resurgence of all those metal bands in the early 2000s. You know, with that were people were getting into the hair metal scene again.
Mhm.
They kind of came back, but then Tom and Jeff just could not get it together. And more Jeff couldn't get it together because he had a drinking problem. And him and Tom were just basically refuting. They stopped performing as a band, and Tom started doing more and more of his solo stuff. It's unfortunate. But you know, Jeff passed away and they never were able to reconcile in that regards.
Yeah, it's a shame. Um, you
And they
know,
were friends, and they were friends. They just couldn't work together
it's
because of his addiction.
we
Because
had that conversation earlier about a different subject, but how you can't work with some people.
exactly, right,
Yeah.
right. All right, so now we jump to an alternative metal band is technically what they're considered um, to some degree, and we're talking about Creed, the band from Tallahassee, Florida. They have the same: four studio albums, one live album, one EP, three compilations. Three out of the four albums went gold and platinum, which is very similar to Cinderella. Two of the albums went six times platinum, and one of those albums went diamond. That is, and they also released 18 singles, four of which went double platinum. So that is quite an accomplishment for those guys, to have an album go diamond. It actually sold 11 million copies, but diamond is the excess of 10 million copies of an album sold in the United States. That's a fucking amazing achievement. And that was the album Human Clay. Uh, one that's my favorite Creed album when you get down to it. Creed is a controversial band, to put it that way. You're gonna sit there and say they're not metal because they had these um, what do you want to call it? These pop singles. Specifically, we're talking with with Arms Wide Open, my sacrifice, uh, shit like that. What's his life for one? All these sappy songs, but they also had some really killer hard rock songs in between. So,
Their first album, I think, is a lot more heavy than the stuff that came later. And big fans of Creed will cite that often, because like I was definitely among those people that like would criticize Creed a lot. And when we first became friends, like that was a conversation that we had where I don't hate Creed by any means, but I never really got into them. My sister was a huge fan. She actually, and I kind of bitched her out for this. She had tickets to see them at the rodeo, and she was just like, "I'm really tired. I have too much going on and work and stuff like that." And I was like, "Yeah, but when are you gonna get the chance to see them again?" You know.
mhm.
And so I wish she had gone to see them, but she just skipped out on it, which is kind of a bummer.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's no skin off my nose, but at the same time, like, you care about your friends and your family and you want them
No,
to
of
like
course,
do those things that they may not get the chance to do again. So,
absolutely. I mean, look, this to me, their second album's got some great songs on it. Beyond with Arms Wide Open, the first half of the album, to me, in my opinion, is amazing. Are You Ready? What If? Beautiful. So when I was playing in a band back in the let's see, early 2000s, 2004, um, we wanted to do a song, so we were doing Godsmack songs, and we did a couple of Offspring songs. But the guy's like, "Hey, we got to learn a Creed song," and we didn't want to just learn, the standard kind of stuff. So we said, "What song do you want to do?" And we picked "Beautiful," and that song is amazing. It has some real heaviness to it, and then there's got some quiet parts and some slow down, some soft vocals, but it is a strong lyrical song, and I love that song. It's beautiful to me. um,
I see
but
what you did there.
you saw what I did there? But "Say I" is good. "Faceless Man" is an interesting song. I think this album, first half of the album is great to me. "With Arms Wide Open" and "Higher" obviously are great songs as well. Um, so, and I trust me, when you look at the first album's incredible. Um, you know, "Torn," "Ode," "My Own Prison," those first three songs on that first album, just it's just amazing, and then "Unforgiven," I love that song. "What's This Life For" is cool, one is cool, but they get a little sappy towards the end of the album. So, um, and then the third album comes out, and it was kind of like the same old shit, and that's where I think Creed started going sideways, even though I tell you, "Bullets" is a great song. "One Last Breath," "My Sacrifice," those are the kind of sappy songs that they started putting out. Um, "Don't Stop Dancing" is a weird kind of song. Again, upbeat but still sappy. it got to the point where it was like, you know,
Well, I mean,
they're
I think
repeating themselves.
yeah, but I think there was like there were some internal problems. Obviously, they had fired the bass player, I believe it was.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, and so there was some disagreements with that. Not Scott Stapp, Mark Tremonti has mentioned that he was frustrated with Scott Stapp being adamantly against having guitar solos, and it wasn't just him, but it was like their producers and stuff like that. So like, there was some tension there, right? And I tend to think, and we discussed this a while back with another episode, where there was this like Nickelback and Creed were fucking huge bands, and whether you like them or not, that's the truth. Because I don't really care for either band, but you can't deny it. They were massive bands. And all of a sudden, there was this anti-Creed, anti-Nickelback sentiment, and we've talked about there's multiple reasons for that. Like there was an anti-Christian sentiment at the time with Creed, and Creed was being identified as a Christian band, even though they technically weren't. But also I think there was a push from the studios, and this is tinfoil hat on, all that shit. But there was a push from the studios to move away from rock music, and these bands got made into a joke, a meme, and that I think it was somewhat by design. Like we're moving on to whatever the next big thing is, and let's move on. So um, you know, I you can't deny the impact that Creed had. I mean, I'm saying this as a non-fan. Like they were everywhere. They were huge. Like you look at the statistics. Most popular song, "One Last Breath," 781 million streams.
No,
Holy shit!
it's insane. You know, yeah, it's it's a it's a lot.
11 times platinum. That and you're gonna tell me that people don't like them? Like, everyone hates Creed? 11 times platinum. Like, yeah, it might be a bunch of normies or whatever, but they obviously have cross, appeal to not just metalheads, not just rock listeners, not just Christians, not just whoever, but it's appealing to 11 enough people that bought it 11,000,000 times.
Oh yeah. No,
So
look, I mean, once when you hit this, you get that crossover when you're playing on pop radio, on rock radio, on metal radio. You're every one of those radio stations is playing a different song.
mhm.
The pop ones are playing, with arms wide open. The rock radio are playing the rock singles like Torn and Unforgiven, or the first one, Are You Ready, or What If, and then you've got the metal stations playing the heavier songs, which is there's not a lot, but they still play them, or they'll even play the rock songs, and they're all over the place. I mean, the exposure is insane. Once you get to that pop level, you're hitting everybody. It's very similar to like Here I Go Again. Everybody knows that song.
Mhm.
You hear it everywhere. It's the same as Enter Sandman. You hear it everywhere. You don't want to hear it again, but you hear it again. You know. So, that's the level to what those songs have gotten, and it's undeniable. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
Same thing with Nickelback. You mentioned Nickelback. Nickelback is the one that became the meme, and overnight they were hated.
Yeah.
Creed slid into that because they were doing the same thing Nickelback did, where they were just repeating themselves, and then the band themselves had the inner fighting and kind of went away. And Scott Stapp kind of was self-destructive at that point too.
He
So
really was, yeah.
so when they broke up, the unfortunate part for Alter Bridge was that they had the stigma. Oh, this is Creed 2.0.
Yeah.
Uh, and that first album didn't do them any favors of breaking that stigma. It was different, granted, but it didn't do them a lot of favors.
Well, it was 2 bands that were very similar, coming together, and you can't expect a whole lot of difference there, right? Like
No,
Mayfield 4 and Creed combining, the result ended up sounding very much like Creed because they both were similar in sound. But you're right, like it doesn't change that perception. So there's a lot of people now that think of Alter Bridge as just like Creed 2.0, and holy shit, like they've had so much heavier stuff. They've had like
oh, they're such a different band.
yeah, it's a shame because like man, I still wanna try to go see them this time, even though it's gonna be really fucking difficult,
Didn't they just
but
pass on a plane no, they thought I thought they
did
were
they
already
just
left.
play?
I
Oh,
think
okay.
so, yeah.
That's how fast time goes by, but,
Or they might
next
be
time they
coming.
come around, man, I wanna see them again, like, they're an awesome band.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I would have loved to have seen him again, but we've gone to I just had a run up of so many different things going on this past several weeks. It's
It's
been
that's
crazy.
life.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we've got Creed, we've got Cinderella. Um, I kind of have an idea where you're heading at. Where's your head at?
I mean, this is gonna sound crazy coming from me, but I think it's gotta be Creed. I mean, I like Cinderella better. I mean, but I also really only like that one album. You're talking about a band, and it's not all about the statistics and the pop aspect of it. You're right. Like, it's like, it's appealing to people that are probably not listening to the show. And like, I don't know if they'll get any further than this, and I'm certainly not basing it on just those accolades, but, like, I think, the impact that they had, I lived through it. I mean, high school, middle school, like, they were freaking massive, and it was some of the metalheads that turned on them later. Like, they were like, they were into Creed at the beginning, and then when the public opinion changed, "Oh, I never liked them." Bullshit.
I know exactly what you're talking about when it comes to people who want to sit there and say they like a band and then all of a sudden they don't like a band. I know how that is. I've seen it happen with people in front of me. Look, if I like a band, I like a band. I don't sit there and deny them later. I'm not doing that to them. Um, I've
I
always
mean, my
liked Creed.
opinion has changed on bands, but I'll say that, like, I liked them
Oh
and
yeah.
then I didn't like them. But there were so many people at the time that I knew that were like, "Oh, yeah, Creed sucks." And I'm like, "Dude, you own their albums, like, what are you talking about?"
Oh yeah. And those guys. What makes me laugh about those guys is the same. It's the same people that sit there and say, "Well, Metallica sucks ever since Ride the Lightning." Give me a fucking break. The people who don't listen to Iron Maiden after Paul Diano, you're fucking stupid. Okay. You're full of shit. If you've never listened to Iron Maiden after Paul Diano, you have fucking missed out.
Well, I mean, look, if you don't like Bruce's voice, I can totally understand that, but at least you give it a try. Yeah, well, at least you give it a try, right? But there's people that will just say like, "Oh, I'm not gonna listen to him because it doesn't have this person in the band," and it's like, "Yeah, yeah, you're right. You're missing out." Well,
I mean, if you tell me you don't you listen to Paul or Iron Maiden those first two albums because of the band that they were, I understand it. I mean, from Number of the Beast on, they are a different band.
mhm.
They shed some of the punk leanings that they had from the first album. They shed certain things that made them who they were in those first two albums. The biggest thing that they shed was Paul Diano, and then,
I mean,
but
it's accurate, yeah.
right. So then, when they got Bruce, it was a different band. Yes, I get that. Musically, they were more mature. They literally were writing songs brand new for the first time.
And some people don't want that maturity. They
Yeah,
want that
no.
that
I,
same rawness of the first few albums.
they
Cool.
want to stay kids. They want to listen to punk music for the rest of their life. I get it. I understand it. They missed out. Um, in this particular case, I never denied Creed. I have never denied Nickelback. I am a fan of both. Okay. I remember, and I'll say it to this day, for to my dying day, I was listening to Nickelback. I was listening to All the Right Reasons, that album, as I crossed the Texas state line when I moved here in 2007. Okay, I that is exactly what I was listening to. That album is fucking amazing. Okay, and uh, you know, I am a Nickelback fan. Now, are they my number one? No. Am I going to listen to
That's
them?
not what I heard. I heard
Hey, no, I don't know what you heard there.
number one Nickelback fan in the world.
No, no, no. I could be the number one Nickelback fan. That could be true, but they are not my number one band.
I
Okay, there's a
don't
difference.
know about that. I see
So
all those Nickelback figures you have all over your office, and then never mind, those are Metallica.
I was kind of like, wow. I started thinking, do they have Funko Pops? But they don't.
I don't think so.
I have Pearl Jam, I have Ozzy, I have Metallica, Aerosmith, Judas Priest. I'm looking at a whole bunch. Oh, Motley Crue, Lemmy, and the War and the Pig. So, all right. So I agree with you. It's got to be Creed. Cinderella is as good as they are, as much as I love them. Creed is just they were a phenomenon. Um, and I don't know if you heard they've been doing a cruise the last couple of years.
I'll be honest, I don't really keep up with Creed.
No, no, but they show up in rock and metal news, right? And
Yeah, I've heard something. My sister said something to that effect.
so
I don't
they
remember what it was, but
and for all those fans out there who don't know, but Mark Tremonti is for lack of a better term, and this is the only way to say it, he is an authorized singer of Frank Sinatra music. And I say it that way because he has literally been granted the okay, like the what is it? The thumbs up basically from the Sinatra family to reproduce and sing Sinatra songs. So he actually did a set of Sinatra songs on this most recent cruise that they played.
it's like when you go to an AT&T store, but it's not really an AT&T store. It says authorized dealer. Like he's that.
Yeah, no, and he does an incredible job. I mean, it's not like he's trying to do Frank, but he has such a good
It's
voice.
He's singing in the same style, but he's not
Yeah, the
doing an
same style.
impression. Yeah.
Right, exactly. He's not doing an impression. But when he did that album that he did for his daughter, um, he actually had the Frank Sinatra band, the surviving members of Frank Sinatra's band played with Mark on that album
Yeah,
because
that's cool.
it was authorized by the Frank Sinatra estate. The word's not authorized. It was
He's an authorized dealer.
endorsed. I'm sorry, endorsed. But yeah, so anyhow, so Creed moves on. They will face the winner between Celtic Frost and Cannibal Corpse. Um, and
The idea of Cannibal Corpse versus Creed is just hilarious to me.
well, it could happen.
It could
Um,
happen. Who knows? We'll
all right,
see.
so we have not talked about Children of Bottom tonight. So we're going to put Children of Bottom up against Candlemass. We've already talked about Candlemass, so let's talk a little bit about Children of Bottom. Children of Bottom is your favorite band, so why don't you go ahead and take the floor?
Yeah, I mean, Children Bottom started in the 1996, I believe, or 1995 as Inearthed, and then changed their name. Essentially, they had the same lineup until their after their fourth album, which was their classic lineup of Alexi Laiho and um, Yana Werman, Alexander Quapala, who was the one who later left the band, and Jaska Rattikainen and Henkati Sepala. Now, that's the lineup that I think of when I think of Children of Bottom, and probably a lot of people do because that's like the golden era. And then Ropa Latvala replaced Alexander after that, and he was in the band forever until Daniel Freiberg replaced him. They have released one album as four piece. Really consistent in sound past their first three albums, I would say. The first three albums are a little bit more neoclassical, and then they dropped a little bit of that to, more wide stream appeal sound. I mean, they're probably their biggest album was um, Are You Dead Yet? which was their 2005 album, which got a little bit more into the, um, mainstream appeal, dropped some of the orchestrals, which they were synonymous with. And I mean, that album was huge. Like it was in Rock Band, that was the point where they were really getting some crossover appeal. And yeah, I mean, just one of those bands that like really resonated with me. um I was lucky enough just to get to see them twice. They were around, 2 decades, and then they broke up due to Alexi's drinking problem, which eventually led to his death. I'm sad that I'll never get to hear more music, but they did release at least one. It was a single, I guess, EP technically. Had 3 songs on it, and that's all they were able to record before his passing. But yeah, really impactful band for me because I started with them. I got their first album right after 1997. And stuck with them the entire way. Even like one of my friends that I was very close with at the time really loved their first 3 albums and dropped off after that. But it didn't matter to me. Like I stuck with that band through thick and thin, and be a Hate Crew member for life.
There you go. Um, I you turned me on to Children of Bottom, and I appreciate that. I have listened to them. I have gotten to uh, understand that style of music, the whole melodic death metal, and I can't. They're not screaming vocals. It's just dirty vocals, death vocals, however you want to call them. Um,
It's a growl.
It's yeah, there's just it's a certain kind of style. Um, and I appreciate it. I don't mind it. I've gotten used to it per se. And I was listening to a little bit of Children today in the car, and I just love the riffing. The production's pretty cool because they do a lot of panning of the guitars and all like you'll hear one guitar all the way to the left, not a solo, but on a spotlight, and it's
Hmm.
super cool when I hear stuff like that, and then the whole band kicks in. I really like that. Children of Bottom for me is definitely one of those bands that um, I wish they were still around because I would like to see them again. I did see them once before, and I thought they were pretty good back then. Everybody was digging on Alexi, so it was. It's a shame that they're not around. Put it that way. Um, they should still be here. Put it that way. You know, but
Yeah,
stuff.
I actually just bought um the vinyl of their last concert. I haven't received it yet, but
Hmm.
I did order it. I actually got a really good price on it, so I'm excited to, get it in my hands and listen to it. I've watched the last show. It's really entertaining, and you know, um not it was emotional to me at the time, like, not breakdown crying or anything like that, but, like, it was sad to see the end of an era. But, you could kind of feel why. So it's an odd experience, but, like, all those guys put everything into it on that last show, which I thought was great. So, really fun to listen to. If you like Yngwie Malmsteen and stuff like that, where it's like neoclassical. I think you'll like at least like the instrumentation, and I would check them out. And like they had a big influence on a lot of bands, like going back to Avenged Sevenfold. They were like there's an interview where M Shadows is talking about who they were trying to go after as far as like fit into what vibe, and that was one of their biggest influences as far as the way they were writing music and stuff at the time. Getting kind of out of the metalcore scene and going more towards that. Like, yeah, they're not the same by any means, but you can pick up on influences in any bands like that. But like they're being involved in that, and living it in real time, is always, I think, a big factor in some of your enjoyment of music and stuff like that. Like, there's lot of bands that I love that I didn't get to experience the whole thing, like Black Sabbath and that kind of stuff. You have to kind of like see it through the lens of the past, but you know, seeing all that at the time, and how many bands were being influenced by that sound and trying to kind of like pick up on it, like Norther was doing that, and Winter Sun, and some of the other bands that were there were a lot of Scandinavian stuff, but a lot of American bands were picking Revocation. They were picking up on a lot of those kind of similarities there. And that, I think that was really cool to see, was like, you love a band and you're seeing that they're influencing so many people too. And Alexi's vocal style was so unique. Like, you can hear Alexi and know it's Alexi every time.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. They were definitely um, felt throughout the music scene, especially the even beyond the melodic death metal scene, even beyond their obviously the Scandinavian area. So they had a big, much bigger appeal than many people thought. Uh,
Mhm.
so, all right. Well, we've already talked about Candlemass. They're going head to head against Candlemass. To me, this is a no brainer. I'm going for Children of Bottom to move on.
I am too. I have a lot of respect for Candlemass, and I'm not simply saying it for the bias of anything. I think it's just the consistency of Children Bottom having really the same band with minor exceptions the entire time, staying true to the type of music that they're playing with. There was still a lot of variety as time went on, but like, they were a instantly recognizable band. Whereas I think the biggest problem for Candlemass is that they were unable to keep that consistency. And it is a damaging part of a legacy for a band when you have like 10 singers, because you start to lose some of what makes that band who they are. So, what were you gonna say?
No, nothing. I'm waiting for you.
Oh, so, like, I think that is what really puts Bottom over for me. Just completely taking out my fandom. I think it's an impact factor as well.
Absolutely. I mean, there's the big thing for me about Candlemass is not just the different singers that they've had, but it's the start stop kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
you don't want a band that you enjoy just all of a sudden going away for 3 4 years. Now, mind you, other bands do that. They won't release an album for, like, Anthrax hasn't released an album for 10 years. However, Anthrax has been in the public eye. They still tour, and they did a lot of different things. Whereas Candlemass literally is like, we're putting this to bed for now. They didn't necessarily say for now per se. We're putting this to bed, and then a couple years later, I'm like, oh, let's do this again, And
Yeah.
so it's tough. I get it, but Children of Bottom definitely influential. Um, so they're going up against Cavalier Conspiracy. Last band that we haven't talked about tonight is Celtic Frost. They're up against Cannibal Corpse. Um, when we talk about Celtic Frost, that's a legacy that is undeniable. Very similar to some of the other bands that we've talked about tonight. Um, 6 studio albums, 3 EPs, 3 compilations, 1 box set, which is not listed on their Wikipedia page, but they remastered their entire album collection, reissued it in this beautiful box set. I wish I could have purchased it, but it was kind of expensive. Celtic Frost broke up in 1993. Tom G. Warrior and Martin Eric Ain reunited in 2001 and began playing shows the following year. Then the band released a new album in 2006. Um, to say that they were an incredible combination of art and music is an understatement. Tom G. Warrior's entire career is based on the fact that there is an art to what he does, and if it got fucked with, he was going to be pissed off and he would rather shut it down than continue. And that's basically what he did to Celtic Frost. So I I love early Celtic Frost, the first, the first album, the first EP, the second album. When it got to be too artsy for me, it became a little bit too monotonous. And I kind of went away from enjoying them. But stuff from the first album and the first EP, Emperor's Return and Morbid Tales, all that stuff, Circle of the Tyrants, you know, I mean, I even got Into the Pandemonium, which had that cover song, Mexican Radio. You could tell at that point that they were getting kind of screwed with, but Mexican Radio was a pretty cool cover. um, but then after that, it was just kind of like, I don't know about that anymore.
Um, yeah, I mean, like they're kind of like the grandpappies of extreme metal in a way, right? Like,
Oh
they're
yeah,
obviously Hellhammer came before, but Hellhammer's Tom G. Warrior, and Morbid Tales being the beginning, 1984, such a cool EP. Um, then you have Emperor's Return, which, I mean, what an awesome album cover. um, and then to Megatherian, that's like the real, like the studio album, right? Like that's the uh essentially the debut. I guess you could consider Morbid Tales the debut, but it's an EP, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
and
Morbid
I
Tales is an
guess
EP,
no,
but
it's
it was a very long EP.
yeah, so it is considered an LP, right? But I
Well,
guess it,
it was considered an LP in the United States because they added some songs on to
okay.
it.
So
So
yeah, I'm seeing mini LP. So anyway, to Megatherion, I think is what a lot of people would consider like their first major release. And man, it's so just the vibe, like, right? Because it's got like elements of all different kinds of metal that stuff would pull from. Like you could call it just an extreme metal album because of all those things. Now you define it by this song is this genre, this song's this genre. But like at the time, it's what influenced a lot of people. 1985, and they're putting out something like this. Like, what were other bands doing at the time? Nothing like this. So, that's pretty huge. Into the Pandemonium, yeah, you're like, what a interesting choice of Mexican radio. But like, that's it's so interesting, like the choices that he would make, right? Then you get to Cold Lake, and that is just what a misstep. Um,
I mean, I think what ended up happening, obviously the record company is majorly influential, but you know, Into the Pandemonium is on Noise Combat, right? And then
uh,
Cold Lake comes out on Noise, and I guess for me, it all started where they had this success with Mexican radio, and my guess is that the record label's like, hey, if you could do that, then you could do the whole album like that kind of thing.
yeah.
And dude, they're talking about selling out. I mean, straight vocals, and it was just the 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 glammy hair. It was just it was just bad.
Well,
Um,
I like Vanity Nemesis. Like they got back on track with that. It's a little more avant-garde, but like it's I think it's a much better album. But then Monotheist, man, like that is a vibe of an album. Like gothic doom, experimental, kind of black metal, like it's dude, it's a different vibe to it. And for that to be their last album, and what's crazy is, and I did not expect this at all, their most popular song via streams is from that album, A Dying God Coming into Human Flesh. I did not expect that at all. I thought for sure it would be something from To Megatherion. Um, you know, it was surprising to me, but yeah, like their later era stuff is still pretty huge.
they were definitely a different band. They crossed over all sorts of different genres, and
Mhm.
this, when I think back, I mean, I still thoroughly enjoy listening to Morbid Tales, Into Crypts of Rays, Procreation of the Wicked, Visions of Mortality, and then the stuff off of Circle of Tyrants is my favorite Celtic Frost song. Morbid Tales, Dethroned Emperor. I mean, like I listened to the fact that I believe it was Sepultura did Procreation of the Wicked. Um, I forgot who did Dethroned Emperor. Oh, I think it was Anthrax did Dethroned Emperor as a B side. Um, just and then not only were they good songs, but damn, they sounded amazing. The bass was clear, the drums were great. The bass and drums were recorded amazing. The thing that really lacked with them, and I said this before on a previous episode, their guitar work was not necessarily the best, and the way that the guitars sounded, but you can't take away from the overall production, which was pretty incredible for the year 1985, especially considering the budget that they had and where it was recorded over there in Scandinavia, because that's the kind of thing that you don't. Well, actually, it was recorded in Germany, but regardless, it was out there in Europe. It's one of those things where it's like there's no money out there, for these very small bands. There's not a label throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars and give me your best album. It doesn't work that way. So
Mhm.
to get the sound that they got, it's incredible. Um, so influential, absolutely. I mean, they black metal. Uh, they were part of the thrash metal scene for a bit. Extreme metal for sure. Hellhammer was begat them, but okay, but that was part of that whole vibe. So when you look at everything, you're talking about Celtic verse. You're talking about Celtic Frost versus Cannibal Corpse. Um, I'm leaning towards Celtic Frost just because of the influence and the fact that they were able to help start other genres.
I think the influence is a big factor. That being said, Cannibal Corpse is so much more consistent. Because like if you go from Celtic Frost album to the next one, yeah, there's a lot of similarities across various albums, but there's some wide variety in styles and the direction that they were going and things like that. But I think that can equally be used in favor of their argument of, like they were much more creative in what they were doing, and mostly Tom G. Warrior and Martin Eric Ain, Mark St. Reed or Mark, sorry, Reed St. Mark. I said it backwards. On drums, man, like that was like the classic lineup. But like Tom G. Warrior said, there is no band without Martin Eric Ain, right? And so we'll never get another Celtic Frost album in theory. I don't think we should get another one. Um, because that was the band, and I respect that mentality. Um, yeah, Cannibal Corpse has like a few more accolades as far as like little awards and this and that. And yeah, they were in um Ace Ventura, which I think is just hilarious. And that was specifically at the request of Jim Carrey. They were trying to get another band for the movie, and Jim Carrey like was such a big fan of that kind of metal that he asked specifically for Cannibal Corpse, which I think is just freaking hilarious. Um, but I don't think in my mind that's enough to put them over the influence that Celtic Frost had.
I agree. I agree. I mean, I've been leaning towards Celtic Frost this entire time, just because of that. There's legacy, there's influence, and those are huge, huge factors.
Mhm.
Um, and you said before we'll never get Celtic Frost, and that's basically a direct quote uh, from Tom. But Tom has Triptychon now, which he said he will make sound as close to Celtic Frost as humanly possible. And he's done 2 albums and an EP. So that's that is basically Celtic Frost, and his Triptychon actually started with Reed St. Mark on drums, but it has not been able to um, continue. He wasn't with them. He's only there for like a few months.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's good music. I've listened to a bit of Triptychon. Um, and funny enough, if you're a Transformers fan out there, there's a Transformer named Triptychon, which was from the 80s, so well before, which I think is hilarious. But and, that's complete aside. Um, it's one of those things that like it's kind of like what we talked about with Cavalier Conspiracy, where um, there's going to be this stigma of this is, it's not the band that I'm wanting to listen to. It's just the legacy of the band. That doesn't mean it's not as good. It just means that like that's how people perceive things, and it's a dumb way of perceiving things. So like we talked about with Alter Bridge too. Like Alter Bridge, people, oh, it's Creed 2.0. It's not. Um, Go out there, try something new, try listening to something. I can't tell you how many times when doing this show that I found something new that I never would have given a chance to, that now I'm really enjoying it. Like we talked about Cinderella earlier. Cinderella, I totally wrote off when I was younger, but because we went over different stuff over the course of these, like I like the album enough to go buy it now. So like open up your ears and try something new.
it's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I mean, you've turned me on to some stuff, and like now I'm a fan of In Flames. I'm a fan of Children of Bottom. I'm a fan of Halo Effect, which is pretty cool. I have yet to get really into Soilwork. I have yet to get really into Dark Tranquility, but I know they're all along the same lines. I just haven't.
Mhm.
I just haven't listened enough.
Yeah.
But so let's move it on. Celtic Frost moves on against. They will now face Creed.
That's so wild.
Um, but so let's go to Cavalier Conspiracy versus Children of Bottom. So those are Celtic Frost, Creed, Cavalier Conspiracy, Children of Bottom. Those are the final four. Cavalier Conspiracy versus Children of Bottom. Legacy versus influence. I'll look. I want to put it like that. In this particular case, you got legacy of Cavalier Conspiracy because they're associated with Sepultura versus the influence of Children of Bottom.
I'm I mean, again, like I don't want to be a fanboy by any means. Like, so I'm really taking that out of the equation. But I
You're a
have to
fan
think about
bitch.
right. But I have to think about, okay, so like Cavalier Conspiracy only has 4 albums over a long period of time. That's partially due to the output between Cavalier Conspiracy and Soulfly, right? Um, a lot of what Cavalera is, and when they travel and play, is a legacy of Sepultura plus new music. What the direction they would have taken Sepultura in had they continued as Sepultura. So, do I think they have more of an impact than Children of Bottom? No. Children of Bottom has always been their own band. They don't sound like anybody else. And that can be said for Sepultura, but Cavalera again is the legacy of Sepultura. So would I be more apt to put Sepultura in as my choice for S later on? Probably, but not as much with Cavalera Conspiracy because it is a legacy of that band, essentially.
I'm with you, man. I agree. I think Children of Bottom, their influence, just in the whole melodic death metal scene, is absolutely there. Cavalier Conspiracy is more along the lines of continuing something, but well after the fact.
Yeah.
So, while they're a great band, I believe in this particular case, Children of Bottom should move on.
Agreed.
All right, so Children of Bottom moves on. Um, they have made it to the finals. Now they're going up against Celtic Frost or Creed. So
Yes. Goddamn.
put it this way, so we just finished talking about Celtic Frost. We understand what they're all about. We finished talking about Creed. So Celtic Frost versus Creed. It's an interesting one. Um, I, if I'm gonna sit there and say, who should move on, I'm gonna almost sit there and say, I believe in this particular case, Creed should be moving on. For the accolades, for the I'm not going to say influence, that's for sure, but just their mass appeal and impact on the music scene.
So, why I'm gonna disagree with you is a word you just used is influence, right? Celtic Frost influenced pretty much every extreme metal band that came after. And what is metal now more than anything is extreme metal. Like if you're looking at the biggest bands that are out there, with the exception of legacy bands and older bands that are getting ready to retire and stuff like that, the biggest bands out there, Slipknot and some of these other ones that are still popping up and becoming huge. Harsh vocals are what are some of the biggest things now. Um, and the extreme metal sounds. That's what's still around today. And being that the influence came from only a few select bands that really took off on that, like Venom or Merciful Fate or Hellhammer slash um, Celtic Frost. Yeah, and there's a few others, but that early stuff was really all from those very few bands, and Celtic Frost having those harsh vocals and being such an influence on that, I think is a major factor. Um, Whereas Creed didn't really influence anybody. They were huge and they had mass appeal, but they don't in the metal scene don't have as much of an impact as they do for the normie slash hard rock slash um, pop scene. And to put them at the forefront of who represents metal, I think would be a disservice. Like, I think, yes, to push them this far along, I was very generous in that regard because I don't really view them as a metal band. Yes, they have some heavy songs, they have some good guitar riffs, but I don't view them as a metal band. And to say who represents metal better, gotta say it's Celtic Frost.
So I knew you were going to say all that. Um, actually, I agree with you. I as much as I'd love Creed, they like you said, they don't represent metal. So I agree with you on all those points. They did have a huge impact in that the genre that they're in, which is alternative metal,
Mhm.
very similar to the impact that um, Nickelback has. And that little segment of the alternative metal scene that includes, someone like Nickelback and someone like Creed, someone like Alter Bridge, um, that's a completely different segment. That is not enough to sit there and say, yeah, they're going to
A
represent metal. And I agree with you. Celtic Frost should be that band.
and I don't even think they necessarily influenced a lot of those bands. A lot of those guys came up at the same time,
Yeah, yeah. I'm not
and
saying
and
it was influence or
no,
anything.
no, and again, I'm not telling you you're wrong or anything, but, like, what I'm saying is, like, what's surprising is, like, there was a lot of bands that kinda came up at the same time, and they were different, but they all fit into that same group, and they were really talented and really like skilled for what they did. And like I think it's such a shame that people hate on those bands just to hate on them. I think it sucks. Like, get over it. Listen to music that you like. Stop lying, and just like listen to the bands that you really enjoy. And if you like Creed, love Creed. If you like Nickelback, love Nickelback. Don't worry about what other people think. Listen to that shit. You know, I'll be over here listening to my stuff, but
Well,
enjoy that shit that you enjoy. And
all right,
and
I'm going. I'm gonna go listen to the Monkeys. Bye.
all right. But you get my point. Um it's so funny because it's like I think and there probably was some level of influence and there was producers involved that were pushing these bands to go in similar directions and stuff like that cuz that's how music industry works. But you had a bunch of these bands that popped up around the same time that all kind of had that excuse me, that all kind of had that it factor. And maybe we should do an episode about some of that stuff later. The Godsmack kind of era. Godsmack, what was the other ones? Creed and Nickelback and stuff like that, where you know um not necessarily new metal bands because they weren't really, but that alternative rock, hard rock metal stuff that popped up. And again, I don't think they qualify for this one, but I think you can't deny the status and the just sheer um massive fan base that Creed had.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, I consider myself part of it, but I also consider myself a fan of Celtic Frost.
Yeah.
So Celtic Frost moves on against Children of Bottom. This is an interesting one. I really want to know what you have to say about it.
That's a tough one for me, honestly. Like, because I love Children of Bottom, and I do think they have an influence factor. But everything that I just said about Celtic Frost, I think you have to really consider as being, a real reason why they should be in the contender for this. Like they do have such an influence on everything that came after them. Black metal, death metal, doom metal, thrash metal, everything that came after them, somebody got some level of influence from. Not maybe not everybody, but you get my point. Like if you're taking it that literally, then come on. But like, man, Children of Bottom is multiple gold and platinum status in the European realm, like in Finland and stuff like that. Like, so where, that's a different part of the world that we're not from, and has has a different aesthetic taste for music, and we can't not take that into consideration because another country, another part of the world, to have that level of love for a band, it's just as valid as it being here. It's just a smaller scale, right? But aside from that, neither of them really have major accolades that you can just point to, other than both of them being very influential. Alexi Laiho being massively influential to guitarists. Celtic Frost as a whole just being influential to the whole genre. Um, so it is a tough one for me because I think like I grew up with a lot of people, and crazy enough, like a lot of girls that typically weren't into that kind of music got into that genre of music because of the appeal of Children of Bottom, at least that I grew up around. Um, and it's harder for me to see that same context because I didn't grow up um, with Celtic Frost in the same way. But you may have a better insight on that than I do.
It was just a bunch of guys.
As a bunch of sweaty dudes.
Yes, a bunch of sweaty dudes. I mean, I saw Celtic Frost in 1987 open up for Anthrax,
Okay.
um, and they were in the midst of that eventual changeover to like the Cold Lake era
Okay.
at that time. So, I mean, they were still playing their hits. They were still there. They weren't completely because Cold Lake, I think, was in '89. Um,
And
but
I don't know this, I'm sorry to interrupt, but, like, I wonder what the shows were like at that time, because that'd be such a weird, jarring kinda show, like, were they just playing the Cold Lake kinda stuff at that time, or were they mixing it with the older stuff? So you're listening to, like, a glam metal, and they're looking like glam metal guys to a degree, and then all of a sudden, they're playing heavy shit off of the first couple albums. That would be really jarring show to see.
yeah, especially if somebody just came off the Sunset Strip or something.
Right?
um, so I'm trying to think here when album came out when. Yes, so Into the Pandemonium came out in '87. So yeah, so they were coming off of that. They were off of that. So Cold Lake didn't come out for another year.
Okay.
Um, so to answer your question, I mean, it was just it wasn't the same. There wasn't a lot of girls in the audience back then. There was some, but the heavier the music got, the less girls it had.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
so
has changed, which is kinda
oh
awesome.
yeah, it's so different now. I would, if you look at me, I and I got to look at this, and I know you're looking at it in a certain way, but for me, I sit there and say, okay, very similar to Black Sabbath, right? When we did the Beast, a couple episodes ago,
Mhm.
you look at the bracket, and you sit there and say, okay, who's going to beat Black Sabbath? Can anybody beat Black Sabbath?
Yeah.
Right. So in this particular case, you look at this, and you really didn't know at the beginning of this that Celtic Frost was going to get to the end, right? Because it could have went either way. If Cinderella had beaten Creed, in our opinions, does Celtic Frost beat Cinderella? Who knows? It's maybe you know, if I would have put Celtic Frost against Children of Bottom early on, who knows how this bracket would look,
Yeah.
or how it would look. But here we are now. So I look at this. Celtic Frost is basically why Children of Bottom exists to some degree.
In some
In
yeah,
some cases,
like I
right?
said, they influenced all those bands that came
Right.
after.
They're, Celtic Frost from Switzerland. They influenced the look because yeah, it's funny because everyone talks about how King Diamond was the first person to wear corpse paint, but no one did it again until Celtic Frost did it a little bit. They went on and off. It wasn't a main part of their show, but they did from time to time play with corpse paint. Um, but then the fast pace, the extreme thing. Their vocals were very different. So they had a huge influence on what was going on over in the Scandinavian area. Okay, and so including obviously black metal, which was big. It was starting, that mid '80s black metal that started. So, do you put Children of Bottom above Celtic Frost because you have this guitar player that stands out and influences a bunch of people? I look at it as without Celtic Frost, you're going to have a different version of Bottom. Put it that way. You're going to have a different version of Amon Amarth. You're going to have a different version of In Flames. Some of that stuff just might not be there. Maybe, but who knows? Because Celtic Frost started in 1983, and their influence has been well documented.
Yeah, and in some ways I agree with you, right? But I also think that, like, okay, you can consider Hellhammer to be part of that as well, right? Like Hellhammer was a brief period of time, but in some ways, if you're making the argument of which started it, Hellhammer technically did, right?
Right.
So that muddies the legacy to some degree because it's not the same band. Um, and it refutes my earlier argument to some degree. So and I can't 100% say that, but at the same time, it like one thing that's really hard when thinking about all these things is how much of today do you take into account versus the overall uh, like influence as a whole, right? So I think it's an argument that I have with, not an argument, but a discussion I have with my dad from time to time is you can say, man, the world just ain't what it used to be. Right. And I think that's a valid sentiment that everybody has at times. But the fact is there's a generation that's coming up after what you're used to, and their perspective on things is very different than what yours is. And so it's like, is it the right sentiment? I don't know, but is it what's happening? Yeah. So, um, there is that part of the argument as well, is like, this band that influenced everybody, um, like Black Sabbath. I think Black Sabbath you can't compare to anybody in that regard, because Black Sabbath, there's just, that is the progenitor of all metal as a whole, right? Not just the genre, but like without Black Sabbath's sound, yeah, somebody might have done it afterwards, but they didn't. And that one's a hard one to argue. Um, so while I agree with you, I think it's a little easier to refute that one, than say Black Sabbath. Um, that doesn't mean I'm not going to go with your same sentiment at the end, but just to put that out there as an argument, yeah, like, do they have as much of an influence as Black Sabbath? No, but you're right. Like they're without their impact on the extreme metal scene, would it have happened at the same rate? Would it have been what it is now? I don't know. You're right. Like that's a tough argument.
I look back on it all, having lived through it.
Mhm.
Um, I remember Slayer coming out, uh,
Mhm.
or getting popular. I remember seeing Celtic Frost in terms of, the records. I have Into the Pandemonium. I have Venom's albums, the first two, I think, or maybe just black metal. I can't remember. I had at one point I had Possessed. I don't know what happened to it. Um, so living through that, when you say, would did one band really do it? Like you said, Hellhammer was really more of the purveyor than Celtic Frost was. Venom started before all of that. Um, and then even then Venom influenced other bands in different ways that eventually became that black metal and death metal.
Yes.
So, um, did Celtic Frost have that much of an impact? I'll say this: you would think that the bands that were influenced by Celtic Frost would be more artsy,
That's a fair argument too. You're right. Like that is something that I didn't consider. You would think that that would be a part of it too.
right? So, when you look at it, I think there's definitely a lot in terms of the visual art that they used, on the album covers and the kind of style that they put together. That definitely was something that bands like Bottom used. Bands like some of the black metal bands using all that imagery. That definitely is was influenced there. However, like when you think about the actual artistic stuff that Celtic Frost did, that really never came across with anybody else. Like there's not really like maybe uh, this is going to be a strange thing because I don't know anything about them, but I almost picture Sleep Token being really influenced by Celtic Frost
Hmm.
in a weird way. But I don't know enough about Sleep Token's music.
I don't know anything about Sleep
I
Token,
just
so
know right. I just know about their image,
mhm.
and there's something about their image that it feels like it comes from there, even though they're not,
But
they're not
the
related.
thing is that a lot of their imagery, and I'm referring to Celtic Frost in this regard, they're they're pulling it from a well-known artist. And so it's not really Tom G. Warrior's vision. They're using H.R. Giger's art to kind of create that imagery of what would kind of continue on for a little bit. But like the second, or was it the third album? Um, so if you told me that their third album was a Bathory album with like no text on it, I'd probably believe you. So I mean, a lot of the stuff that you're saying is not wrong. There is like a certain image that they were going for, but they based a lot of that around what other artists created, and so I'm gonna disagree to some or to some aspect of that. That being said, had they not pulled that imagery in, a lot of other bands would not have picked up on that. I wouldn't say Bottom would be one of those, um, but that being said, like so many bands in the 2000s kind of had that same imagery.
Yeah, I agree with you. Um, when I look at the whole of everything, I can't help but realize as influential now. We're talking back and forth, and some of the things you've kind of opened up my eyes to understanding. You're right. I mean, Celtic Frost, and the same thing as I mentioned, you would think it would be more influential in a certain way. So, um, I I can see the fact that because they were so successful, Children of Bottom is probably more of the band that should be the head of the C section.
So let's think about it this way. So in current day, who's going to win, right? So let's say monthly listeners for Children of Bottom is 798,000, whereas Celtic Frost is 112. So Bottom wins in current popularity. Uh, as far as platinum sales, that one's a tough one because again, it's all based on outside of the U.S. But Children of Bottom would win that. As far as awards go, um, not much to judge on, but it's a lot of European awards as well. Children of Bottom wins a bit, but as far as impact and influence, you're right. Like Celtic Frost definitely wins that one. Like it's definitely more influence, but that's a hard one to judge on just based on one band started, a decade earlier than the other. So there's more time to have that influence and they came out first. But as far as like being a better band, um that's all subjective. You can't really say that. So I think it's a really close one. So I'm not bothered either way it goes. But I if you don't discuss all these things, you're not going to get to the root of it. You're just going to pick, oh, my this is my favorite band, so they should win. I don't believe that. Um, so it's a really tough one. I mean, like, what do you think based on those statistics I just gave?
Oh, it goes to Bottom.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, I'm posing the argument because a lot of the times, with this is the first time that we're really having these kind of debate type things where we're going back and forth, and there's a lot of times where I'm just playing devil's advocate without saying it because I want to see, where you go with it. I want to
Yeah.
hear what you have to say. And I agree with all that. There's an influence, and then there's an impact, and we talked about the impact of Creed versus the influence of Celtic Frost. But
Mhm.
you know, I think between Bottom and Frost, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, there's a bigger impact in the scene that they were in for Bottom than there is in Celtic Frost towards that scene, so many years later.
Yeah, and I think it's a hard thing to judge because instinct is to always go with like who came first in a lot of ways. Um, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the best at what they did because like if we're gonna talk about like say um hair metal, you know, who started it versus who did it best, that's a tough discussion. You have hundreds of bands that you can go through, not hundreds, but I'm being facetious, but like there's a lot of bands to have that discussion about. And, you know, eh, to determine who represents that genre the best, that would be a tough conversation. But it's like, these conversations, like, the criteria changes as it goes. Like, if you were talking about just in worldwide appeal, yeah, Creed crushes everyone, but do I think they represent metal better? No. So it's like, this is I like these debates because it's a tough discussion.
It's absolutely a tough discussion, and it's one of those that I'm glad that we're doing it because we're getting these things out that we really haven't done a lot of, you
Yeah.
know. And so that was something I definitely wanted to do in recent history. So I'm saying that we should call it right now. Um,
Okay.
Children of Bottom.
All right. Well, I don't care if you call me a ringer for him or a fanboy. I think it's still the right decision. So, um, yeah, let's call it the winner this time.
All right, Children of Bottom wins the C bracket for the ABCs of Metal. All right. Wow, that was a long one, and we're going to continue here to finish up real quick. The big four songs that start with the letter C. I believe on the last episode with the bees, I went first. No, you went first. So I'm going to go. No, I went first. So because I had to
Okay.
get it off my chest. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, go ahead and tell me what you got.
All right. My number four is "Children of the Grave" by Black Sabbath. I've talked about that a few times before. That's my favorite Black Sabbath song, and I just love the way that Bill Ward plays the drums on there. Drums are going to be a continuing thing where I bring it up because I really was thinking about it a lot in the recent past of like what draws me to certain kind of music, and drums are a big factor of that. Um, my number three is maybe a little bit of recency bias, but Cosmic by Avenged Sevenfold. Like, this is probably um it some people might say it's not like a really, really metal song, but it's like going on three journeys in one song. And it's one that has really, spoken to my soul and like the journey I'm on in life right now. And it's one that I keep going back to and listening to that over and over again. And it's off their most recent album. And it's like, you know, if you've ever dealt with a loss in life and loss of friends, I've had multiple friends die over the years. I lost a couple in high school. I've lost some after that. And loss has been a theme in my life, unfortunately, a lot of times. And when you think about like the journey that you're going on, and someday again, maybe you get the chance to see those friends again. That's a song that I can get behind. So, my number two is a classic throughout my life, which is Crystal Mountain by Death. Um, I really love that song. It's probably one of their more simple ones, but it's just such a heavy riff and one of my favorites by the band. Definitely had to make the list. And then my number one is Clayman from In Flames. I've mentioned many times that that's probably my favorite album of all time, and it's just one that, like, it's a front to back album for me. It's a level of maturity that the band had not reached until this album. Clayman being the title track. It is a great song. It's not my favorite off the album, but at the same time, it is one that has really always stuck with me. And again, it's like another album that, like, is more introspective in its lyrics and a bit transformative in, state of life and, things like that. And it's a good, theme that I think I keep coming back to. And it's just probably going to be a couple more songs from that album that end up being on my big fours over time. So
I I don't doubt that. Um, that's a good list. I like it. And very expected, put it that way, in terms of where you got some of the songs from.
yeah.
I knew you were gonna have Black Sabbath on there. Children of the Grave. Thought it might be higher though.
Yeah, it's there was like 3 or 4 other songs that did not make it to the list that I was like, "Man, this is tough." There's a lot of songs with C that I like. So,
Yep, absolutely. All right, so for me, number 4, Creatures of the Night from Kiss. Um, I had originally Calling Dr. Love, and I kinda had a toss up, but I really love Creatures.
that's a
So
great song.
that was my number 4. Number 3, Iron Maiden, The Klansman. Just love that song. You know, it was one of those songs that got lost for me when the Blaze Bailey era existed, and I never really got into it back then. I there was just a few months a couple years ago where I just couldn't stop listening to this song. It was just amazing. It's a great song. So that's my number 3. Number 2, Cowboys from Hell from Pantera.
Good
Um,
choice.
Going through my C's, I'm like looking at it, I'm like, ooh, how can I not put this song on here? It is just a great song. I love that song. It's Pantera. What else can you say? But number 1 for me is from my favorite band. It is my favorite song from that favorite band, Creeping Death from Metallica. Just that is my favorite Metallica song, period.
That was one of the 3 or 4 that I man, I really like that song, and I remember the first time I heard it, like, and just really liking it so much. I like a lot of songs that are, like, based on, religious stories too, which is funny.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our big 4 songs that start with the letter C. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Debating Metal. And if you did, please click like or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you can download our latest episode as soon as it drops. And while you're there, go ahead and leave us a comment so we know what you're thinking.
And don't forget you can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and on X, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. YouTube viewers, click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when we post a new show. And remember, tune into the next episode where we'll spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya.